Welcome to another action-packed episode of Crept from the 80's. This is a more, shall we say, intimate episode of Crept. It won't be as long. It's going to be sort of a cheap quickie, if you will. But I'll hold something true about it. I'll still feel right in the morning. I don't know about you, but I will. And folks, this little episode is, well, it's another toy episode. As I told you before, we'd be talking about toys many times on this channel. And I thought it would be fun to do a series of episodes about certain toy companies. And the toy lines within those companies that we hold dear and true. And today I want to talk about probably my favorite toy company from the 80's of all time and beyond times. Kenner! Kenner Toys. You 80's kids, and even the 90's kids, you'll know Kenner. I suppose in the 90's it was more, you had your aliens and your predators and gargoyles and what else? The Jurassic Park. Kenner handled those lines, all those lines. Kenner was also pretty much thanks to Star Wars. They really had a handle on toys that were based on cartoons, movie properties, things of that nature. They did it a lot, and in fact some of them are my favorite toys that we're going to be talking about. So Kenner, I believe it was the 1946, 47, something like that. They started in Cincinnati, Ohio. Now folks, I'm not going to do a history lesson for you. I'm not that guy. There's plenty of people out there who do those things on the YouTubes and whatnots and get really in depth. This is really, this channel in general is just really all about the memories, the connections, the things that we hold dear in our 40s as man-children, and what we loved growing up in the 1980s. So I may be able to sprinkle a few nuggets of knowledge here and there about these things, but for the most part it's just really about the toys and the feelings and all that stuff. But I do know they were started in the 40s in Cincinnati, Ohio. To this day, at the original building, there is a mural, a giant mural painted with all of the famous toys from Kenner on the building. It is no longer the Kenner building, of course. I believe it's Kroger or something like that. I don't know. I can't even remember what it is. That might have been made up. It's Seinfeld. I don't know. But Kenner is responsible for a plethora of toys, boys and girls, 70s and 80s. 90s, as I said, Care Bears, Strawberry Shortcake, Play-Doh, Easy Bake Oven, my goodness. And sadly, in around 91, Hasbro bought them. Hasbro responsible for Transformers and G.I. Joe and whatnot. But they bought Kenner in 91, and I believe Kenner finally kicked the building bucket in 2000. But so Hasbro has carried on the Kenner name, most specifically when they continued to do the Star Wars line. They've kept the Kenner logo in the bottom of the card, which is always nice, very nostalgic. And in fact, in their recent vintage lines, the vintage collections, and also the retro lines, things of that nature, they have really kept that aesthetic alive. Kept the Kenner, kept the original kind of, look of the packaging and everything, which I, of course, appreciate. So in a way, Kenner is still alive. A lot of those people who worked at Kenner went through Hasbro and are still working at Hasbro to this day. I mean, you can get a lot of that info on The Toys That Made Us on Netflix. The Star Wars episode in particular is phenomenal. I can't even tell you how many times I've watched that episode and cried, because it really means something to me. So a myriad of toys through Kenner, but I'm going to talk about the main toys that really hit me as a kid growing up in the 80s, and that I still love to this day, and that I'm trying to bring back into my life. And I'm going to talk about a couple offshoot toys that kind of went on into the early 90s, but cut off there. And I gotta be honest, I stopped collecting those types of toys, those Kenner toys, whatnot, probably around 91, 92. And then I got into the McFarlane toys and all of that stuff, and started hanging that stuff. When Star Wars was released in the 90s, like 95, with the Power of the Force, the second Power of the Force line, I did get a bunch of those. Stopped probably after 6 months, maybe a year, just because the figures were so ripped and they just looked way different. And I think initially I started I started getting them because it was Star Wars again and we hadn't had it for a while. And I certainly went gaga when Phantom Menace came out and bought all those toys, and thankfully they're gone and in a plastic pile somewhere out in the desert. Who knows? Much like the E.T. cartridges. All those Phantom Menace toys are buried somewhere. So let's talk about that initial line from the 80s that I glommed onto and really took and flew and drove my imagination. And of course, I've talked about it many times. I've talked about some of these many times, but this is now its own episode, folks. So I'm going to talk about it again. To you fans. Maybe you fans didn't watch those other episodes, so now you're getting it right now. So, the one that really started it all, Star Wars.
Boba Fett, Darth Vader, Chewbacca, and 18 other action figures, all from Kenner Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back collection, each sold separately. At participating stores, you can check specially marked packages for details on how to get the secret figure. New Bosk, Alien Bounty Hunter, not available in stores yet, free with 4 proofs of purchase from any of The Empire Strikes Back action figures. Offer expires May 31st, 1980. Darth Vader, Chewbacca, Boba Fett, and other action figures, each sold separately. From Kenner Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back collection.
I was born in 77. I feel like I remember the first Star Wars toys that I got probably around 80, 81. It definitely was in the Empire line. And the very first Star Wars toy I ever got from my grandmother, and I remember playing with it on our shag carpet. It was a yellow-orange shag carpet. And I still have that toy to this day. It was the Land Speeder.
It's the new Star Wars Land Speeder.
Wow, looks like it's floating. The Sand People are coming. It's up to Luke Skywalker and his Land Speeder to get us out.
Action figures each sold separately. The Land Speeder has a snap-open space hatch, and Star Wars action figures R2-D2 and C-3PO fit right in back.
Hurry, they're advancing. Activate spring glide wheels.
The Force goes with us.
Yeah.
Kenner's new Star Wars Land Speeder. Action figures each sold separately.
Now this is the Return of the Jedi, Luke Skywalker and Admiral Akbar, of course, but the Land Speeder itself, this is my original Land Speeder from it had to have been 80, 81. Let's see, when did I get this? Well, the toy was made in 78 when the initial line was coming out, but like I said, I got this probably 80, 81. But this is that toy. It's seen better days. It's broken. It's missing the main seats, the switch in between here, but you can still put up the land speeder. Was my first Star Wars toy, and really, Star Wars was my first sort of anything, everything. I mean, we all grew up with Sesame Street, the Muppets, and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and things of that nature. But toy lines, other than say Light Bright and things like that, well, I guess technically maybe Play-Doh would have been the first Kenner toy, but I don't know. I'm talking about that I recognized. It was that logo. It was right there in the corner. Here's an original Return of the Jedi, still carded, weequay, unpunched. But look at that. Look at that gorgeous Kenner. This, folks, this is what we had. This is what we remember, you know? All the figures were on the back, and what you did was you checked them off. You marked them off when you got, ooh, this one I got. Ooh, I don't have this one. It seemed never ending. But, you know, I like to say, I always say that I was a Star Wars kid, being born in '77. It's all I knew. It was the biggest thing in the world when I was a youngster. Star Wars was all I remembered. Star Wars was everywhere. It was everywhere, folks. It was huge. And yes, I was getting other toys at that time. Certainly, 82, 83, my goodness, Masters of the Universe, which is another episode altogether, which we will do. But Star Wars, I mean, it was, thanks to my family, it was everywhere. I had it, I had the sheets, I had anything Star Wars, toothbrush, what have you. I was a Star Wars kid. Pajamas, my clothes, everything. It's just Star Wars. But what really, really got to me was that Return of the Jedi line, which, to this day, I am trying to recollect. Unfortunately, throughout the years, as my son was born and growing, a lot of those 80s toys that I still had, I gave to River so that I could pass on the magic to him. Much to my chagrin, I kind of did it earlier than I probably should have, and he destroyed a lot of those things. In fact, another Kenner toy line he destroyed as well that I'm going to be talking about. But I have been steadily, but slowly recollecting all of the Return of the Jedi line that I did have. And I gotta say, I had a lot of that shit. There's some main vehicles and play sets that I covet from that line in general that I never had and I do want. Like Emperor's Imperial Shuttle. I never had it. And I really would love to have it complete. Would I love to have it with the box? Of course I would, but that's going to be, $300, $400, $600. But you can find them complete in decent shape for like $160, maybe $200. It's not too bad. I don't know if I would pay for it myself, so family members, friends out there, you find a garage sale, you got something up in your basement, your attic, you just be like, you know what, I have that, I don't need that, I'll give it to the sievage. In fact, any of your Return of the Jedi toys from back then, you want to do some trades, I got a lot of movies that I've made, maybe you freaks out there want to get some crazy flicks for some toys, I don't know. But So yeah, slowly I am getting back my Star Wars Return of the Jedi collection. And recently my wife and some friends, you know, for birthdays and Christmases have really been coming through. Unfortunately for them, I would like carded and loose, which is a impossible task, I know. But I'm even okay with repro cards, you know, as long as the figure is the original complete figure. I'm okay with, you know, somebody doing a repro of the card. And you know. But yeah, magic, Star Wars, I love it. I still love it. I mean, it's huge. It's a huge part of my life now. My wife, my kid, Star Wars is huge. And folks, lots of people I saw, you know, the collectors, people of that nature, people who are also nostalgia taxers who like to price gouge true fans. Hasbro Kenner have decided to re-release the original 6 figures from the 78 line, 78, on, you know, the vintage carded, but they've distressed the card to make it even more old looking. But it's a repro of the molds of the original figures. Target exclusives, and of course you vultures are going and buying up the boxes, the full boxes with all of the figures in them, and then reselling them for 3-4 times what these are. These are $9.99, folks, at Target. I've been looking everywhere, and I managed to find one Rogue Leia on the peg. But I want all 6. It just... Again, it's another, you know, instead... This figure in the original packaging, the original figure, pristine, hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. But this delicious repro that still gives me the feels, still brings me back to those times, $9.99. I'll take it. I will take it, folks. That's why I say I'll take repro cards, you know, with the figures. With these retro, they also have, unfortunately, they have these gross ass orange stickers that they put on here that said retro collection. And they're kind of a pain to get off because they're just ugly looking. But, you know, it kind of adds to the distress of the card, so I still enjoy it. Now, I thought it was going to be easy, silly me, knowing the collection world and everything that I've been through, certainly, throughout the years. I thought it would be easy to get, you know, doubles. So I'd get 12 of the 6 that were coming out, so that I could open them and hang them up. I'm gonna be lucky if I can get the other 5. So we'll see. We'll see. Again, folks, if you're out Target, there's a Father's Day display that is going around at some of the Targets, and that's where these are pegged. So if you find them, let me know. I'll do some trades with you for my crazy movies, not toys. Crazy movies that I make. Crazy, wild comedy horror flicks that I've been making forever. People really like them, you know? And you might like them too. So, do us a mitzvah, won't you? Help out this Evage? Anyway, so that's the Star Wars line. Love it. Recollecting Return of the Jedi. Hit me up, folks. Let's get thick into another line from Kenner. That was huge. 1986, the real Ghostbusters.
The real Ghostbusters. There's Peter, Egon, Winston, Ray. Each sold separately. They're running out fast.
Friends, we had, my God, we were spoiled with riches in the 80s. The movies, the television shows, the cartoons, the food. It was an imagination explosion, creativity unbound, ridiculousness, absurdity unbound in the 80s. Ghostbusters is one of those absurd things. 1984, classic film. Of course, I was a giant fan of Ghostbusters. If you go back through my videos, you've heard the tales of me and my friends pretending we were Ghostbusters, actually putting flyers around town as Ghostbusters. If you need a ghost busted, call us. I've told the story where I was pranked terribly, terrified by friends and family. But it's a good, funny tale. But anyway, it was because of my love of Ghostbusters. And of course, the cartoon, the real Ghostbusters. There was a Filmation Ghostbusters cartoon that was happening around the same time that sort of took off from the television show from the 70s. It had a gorilla with two dudes, older gentlemen who hunted ghosts, and it was called Ghostbusters. So they made that cartoon as well. So that's why Columbia, TriStar, Sony made that distinction of the real Ghostbusters. Peter Venkman, Ray Stantz, Egon Spengler, Winston Zeddemore. That Ghostbusters, my Ghostbusters. Truth be told, I did like that other Ghostbusters as well. And I did have some of those toys. But Kenner's Real Ghostbusters line was huge, 86 to 91. And my God, there must have been 6, 7, 8 different series of the toys that were coming out. Because not only did you were given the original core group and the Ecto-1 and the Firehouse and all that good junk, but then they started doing features. Kenner was huge with the whole features thing. So if you squoze the legs, then something crazy would happen to their head or their arms or their body. And they would do it with the ghosts and the figures themselves. And yeah, man, I was getting those Ghostbusters right up until the end, truthfully. So I had a crap ton of them. In my 40s now, looking back, you know, I see that some of them were just ew. And why did I get them other than the you know, deer in headlights devotion that I had to Kenner in the line? But right now, in my 40s, I'm saying that I just really wanted that core. I would say maybe the first 2 years of the real Ghostbusters stuff, and I'm on that path again, thanks to friends and family. I recently was able to obtain the unobtainium, as James Cameron would say. Ray and Peter from the original line, with their proton packs and their proton streams intact. I ain't afraid of no ghosts. Neither are these guys. So obviously I need to get Egon and Winston from this line. Now these loose can go $50, $60, $70. Just the proton packs people sell for like $30. It's nostalgia tax. These are plastic toys that people swindle money. But again, it's this nostalgia tax. There's people out there who will pay hundreds upon thousands of dollars to have their childhood back. As much as I am obsessed, that ain't me. Unless you're a family member or a friend who wants to get these things on my wish lists. But I've gotten back the Ecto-1, the Ecto-2, some of the ghosts, and thanks to Sean Pinkerton who hooked me up with these. My goodness, thank you, Sean. But it was my friend and fan and fellow lover, Brandon Bennett, and his brother, Dustin, who hooked me up with the Firehouse. Complete. What? Now, the Firehouse from that line, from that Kenner line, I never had. My friend Scott up the road had it. So I would take my stuff up the road and play with his Firehouse. But man, I wanted that Firehouse so bad. And finally, a few years ago, on the eve, no, that's not true, post 40 years old, a package comes in the mail, and my God, it's the Firehouse. So thankful. So anyway, I am trying to recollect those lines, those figures, the first 2 series, I would say, from the real Ghostbusters. I want Fearsome Flush. I want all those guys. I want the Gruesome Granny.
She's no sweet old lady.
Friends, if you guys have this stuff and don't want it, send it my way. I will give it a great home, and I'll give you some crazy movies for it. Anyway, so okay. The next big Kenner toy from my childhood that I loved, I have talked about before, so I'll skim it. But it is absolutely one of my favorite Kenner toy lines, and that is M.A.S.K.
M.A.S.K, where illusion is the ultimate weapon.
Convert switchblade to jet mode. Surprise, Matt Tracker. It's mayhem. Battle station. Protect the decoder, Bruce. I'm going up. Stacks ready to fire.
M.A.S.K, Switchblade, Thunderhawk, and Rhino.
Fire!
Each sold separately with action figure.
Cover me, Matt. 10-4. Sato's getting away, but you're not, Mayhem.
M.A.S.K, Switchblade, Thunderhawk, and Rhino, each sold separately, new from Kenner.
M.A.S.K, Mobile Research Command, it basically took G.I. Joe and Transformers, smashed them together, and that's what you got. It was a genius line from Kenner. 85 to 88, and I only got the toys, I would say, from the first 2 lines. I didn't like where they headed. They went like a racing. They did like a racing thing, stock cars, that type of thing. That didn't appeal to me. Didn't appeal to me when they went that way in the cartoon, but they only do that like near the very end, so it's okay. I love that cartoon. But I adore M.A.S.K, and thankfully, again, mostly through my wife, she brought that M.A.S.K line back into my life, and I have a pretty decent collection of what I had growing up. There's a couple vehicles and figures that I didn't have from those first 2 lines that I want to just plug in there, but for the most part, my M.A.S.K is back. So, and it's awesome. And if you don't know M.A.S.K, get on it. It's a very cool line. Even as, you know, somebody in my 40s, I love playing with them. They're very cool. My son, I got into M.A.S.K as well. He really, when I first got the some of them back in my life, he took to them quick, but they were mine. I was supervising as we were playing, making sure he wasn't going to break these vintage toys. Anyway, M.A.S.K, huge. Again, if you want to hear me gush about it, video below. There's 2 more lines that I absolutely adored from Kenner, but they were short-lived. But you folks will probably remember them. Centurions from 1986.
Centurions! Power extreme! Machine!
Jake Rockwell, Detonator, and Hacker each sold separately.
Evil hacker attacks Jake Rockwell.
Eat this, Centurion.
I need a more powerful weapon. Energize Detonator. Now try my diet. This'll stop you. Piece of cake. And now for you. I'm out of here. Your history.
New Centurions, Detonator, Jake Rockwell, and Hacker come as shown, each sold separately.
I I do want them back in my life. Luckily, there weren't many. It was like a 6, maybe 7 figure line. The big deal with the figures was all of the accoutrements that you would get to plug into the figures. Power Extreme, man. See all these holes in their suits? So you would plug in like weapons and either air tactical devices, air tactical suits, or sea. You know, you could take them underwater, which I did a lot actually. I remember very well playing with them in the tub. And yeah, so you bought all these extra things and play sets that would be squished onto them, and you know, you just had a gay old time with the Centurions. There was a short-lived cartoon series as well from Hanna-Barbera, and yeah, I mean, I had all sorts of different Centurion things. There was like, I had a flashlight. I had, you know, I think I had a piggy bank of one of the Centurion helmets. Ah, man, maybe pillowcase or something like that. I don't know. You know, coloring books, whatnot. But Centurions, I loved them. Again, another brilliant line from Kenner. But it didn't last long. Maybe a year, maybe 2 years, all told. But I want them back. Talk about expensive. These guys, loose, yes, they are. If you want them complete, ridiculous. If you want them in box, you're gonna pay about $300 for one figure in box still. It's ridiculous. But that's a grail, you know. I'm totally fine with getting them all just loose with accoutrements. But man, would I love just one Centurion still in package. That would be great. That would be great. Kenner, you wily minx, what are you doing to me? And the last main toy that meant a lot to me from Kenner, from my childhood, that was very short-lived, and most people, when I talk about this line, have zero idea what the hell I'm talking about altogether. This line was called Sky Commanders.
Sky Commanders, where all the action is above the ground.
Set up laser cable! Good work, Cable Raider!
Just as the cable cannon spots the enemy,
Sky Commanders, warning, warning!
the evil raiders attack.
Deception Raider, strike! You're surrounded!
Each sold separately with a figure and cable.
Fire! Gotcha, Raiders!
Sky Commanders, protectors of the high frontier. Cable cannon comes with everything you see here. Other vehicles each sold separately. New from Kenner.
And for a line that probably lasted a year, again, maybe 2 all told, it did have a very short cartoon. It had posters and extra things, just like every kid thing did back in the day. But Sky Commanders, it seemed like they put out a shitload of toys right from the get-go, and then like a year it was gone. And I had a good portion of them. I had a lot of them. They were relatively inexpensive, but they were super cool and super playable. And what they were about as, I would say, is about as big as M.A.S.K figures, which were very small. Probably this. I mean, Kenner. These were not the size of your normal Star Wars figures. I mean, these were tiny figures. And they did that primarily with the M.A.S.K line because of the scale of the vehicles that they were making. So that's for the M.A.S.K line. But Sky Commanders were, for the most part, about the same size. So you would get all these accessories that they could be harnessed into, and then they'd have zip lines. So your room could essentially look like you were playing like that yarn game, the Kid Cross, I don't know. Or you were, part of some FBI group and you were putting yarn everywhere on blots and stuff like that. Anyway, your room would look like some sort of crazy zipline course. And so they had like the main figures with the little packs and the zip lines that could go through. But then they also made like these bigger fortresses and vehicle type things that were also connected to zip lines. They just were really cool. And I had, stupidly, a couple years ago, I managed to get one back in my life, fully boxed, had not been taken out of the inserts at all, and I stupidly sold it last year. And probably an hour or 2 hours after I had sold it, I was kicking myself. Good thing is that the Sky Commanders are relatively inexpensive when you're looking on Etsy or eBay or things like that, even at the toy shows and conventions and whatnot. They're not too bad, which is great. And I will, honestly, I'm just trying to get back any of them. It doesn't matter. I mean, I had so many, and in my head it's just discombobulated with the zip lines and everything. I remember actually I would play Sky Commanders, Star Wars, M.A.S.K, and Centurions all together, and I would mix those worlds. That was another thing that was so great with just being a kid in general, and certainly being a kid in the 80s. I know some friends that I had never mixed their toys. If they were playing Star Wars, then they were playing Star Wars, and I certainly did that. But we had so many amazing toys growing up that I was sharing the love, We were mixing, we were doing it before the MCU. We were mixing universes. We were basically just taking a page out of the comics that we were reading, and I was a huge Marvel fan. And just mixing those universes and playing, I had some G.I. Joe, so I would play G.I. Joes with my Star Wars. We're definitely doing the crossovers with Transformers and whatnot. But man, there was something special about Kenner, and it gives me a heartwarming feeling when I see that logo. I've got stickers and posters and the shirt. And Kenner is just a huge deal, and again, it's responsible for some of the core toys that I absolutely adored growing up and still mean so much to me as an adult. I want to talk a little bit real quick about some of the, as it was getting like 88, 89, 90, 91, there were a couple lines where I didn't get a large portion of the line, but I would get little things here and there from those lines. And like Police Academy came out in 88, lasted I think maybe 2 years all told for those toys. And I had a good chunk of those Police Academy toys from Kenner. And again, just recently sold my original Police Academy toys, and I wish I hadn't. Another line that was cool, didn't last long, but it came out when the sequel came out, which was the Bill and Ted's toys from Kenner. That was like 91, but I did have Bill and Ted. I had the phone booth. Then I think I had like Genghis Khan and a couple of the other characters, but it was a short line. It didn't last. But the cartoon was out, which was rad, and the cereal was awesome from Ralston. But I did have those Kenner Bill and Ted toys, and I want to say I still might have my Bill and Ted, unless somebody did buy them from a $5 box I may have put out. But I would like to get my Bill and Ted back. They also did Beetlejuice, and I had a few of the Beetlejuice toys as well. Oh, they did a RoboCop line. Again, taking these movies and turning them into R-rated movies and turning them into toys was a huge thing in the 80s.
When crime strikes, nothing can stop RoboCop.
Criminals, give up. Surprise, RoboCop. Meet your match.
RoboCop and evil ED-260 face off with rapid repeat cap firing.
That should hold you. Calling the Robo-Jailer. Run away. You won't catch us.
But the Robo-Jailer smashes through their hideout.
You'll be hiding out in prison now.
Figures and vehicles sold separately.
Back for more?
RoboCop and the Ultra Police.
I had a few of those RoboCop toys. They were ridiculous. Silverhawks, which was a great cartoon from Rankin and Bass, and a pretty decent toy line. And Kenner, that was Kenner, man. I didn't have all of that line, but I had a couple of those toys. They were cool. You click the legs together and their hands came up and their wings like popped out. That was cool. And then, of course, as I said before, you know, the Care Bears were huge. My sister had Care Bears. My sister had Strawberry Shortcake, Easy Bake Oven, all that stuff. Kenner, man. Kenner. That's it. That's it. But I hope it brought you some memories. I hope it brought you some good, wet, squishy feelings from your childhood as well. Maybe you're still collecting or recollecting that stuff to have back and just to look at and smile. You know? I mean, that's primarily why we do it, isn't it? Us man children, us adult kids, is to look at that stuff and be transported back like a time machine, back to the 80s, back to your youth, back when it was simpler, when it was super duper fun. My God. I mean, that's certainly why I do it. I'm looking at an Ernest in-box toy, talking toy, from Kenner. How could I forget you? Kenner. So that's it, folks. That was me talking about my favorite Kenner toys from the 80s and now. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it made you cry. Pulled at your nostalgic heartstrings, or as my friend Andrew's grandfather once said, nostalgia, nostalgic heartstrings. Because he forgot how to say nostalgia. So, subscribe if you like this video, if you'd like some of the other videos. Give us a like, comment, let us know what toys you love. I'm sure you want me to talk about Mattel and the Masters of the Universe line, which I will be doing. LJN. Coleco. My goodness. Galoob. It's all coming, folks. So thank you. Thank you for the continued support. Now I'm gonna go do something that I very rarely do, and that's go into the corner of my room and cry that I don't have all of my collection back in my collection. Yeah. Everyone needs a good cry.